forced to share a bed. With his CEO, a poor single dad hears a midnight secret that changes all. The rain came down like it had something to prove that morning, drenching the cracked pavement and washing away what little hope Cale Mercer had left. His shoes were soaked through, his shirt clung uncomfortably to his back, and the envelope in his trembling hands felt heavier than it should have been. Inside it was everything, his last warning from the bank, the final notice before they took the tiny apartment he and his daughter called home. He stood there for a long moment, staring up at the towering glass building in front of him, wondering how a man who once had everything could fall so far that even stepping inside felt like trespassing, but he had no choice, not anymore. Not with his daughter waiting for him to come back with good news he wasn't sure he could deliver. If you believe that kindness and second chances can change lives, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Home with Dad. Stories like this remind us what truly matters. Cale took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air conditioning hit him instantly, cold and sharp, a stark contrast to the humid chaos outside. People in polished shoes and pressed suits moved with purpose, their conversations low and efficient. No one noticed him. Or maybe they did and simply chose not to care. He wasn't one of them anymore. Not since everything collapsed 2 years ago. His job, his savings, his sense of stability. Not since the accident that took his wife and left him alone to raise their daughter, Sarah, who still asked every night if her mother could see them from the sky. This building used to mean something to him. It used to be his second home. But today, it felt like an entirely different world. He approached the front desk with quiet hesitation, explaining that he had an interview. The receptionist barely looked at him, tapping quickly at her keyboard before handing him a temporary badge. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than it should have, each passing number tightening the knot in his chest. The job he was here for wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even close to what he used to do. It was a temporary facilities assistant role, fixing things, moving equipment, handling whatever problems no one else wanted to deal with, but it paid. And right now, that was enough. What he didn't expect was her, Astra Varel, the CEO. He hadn't seen her in person before, only in news articles and company reports. She was known for being brilliant, ruthless, and impossible to impress. The kind of leader who built empires without ever showing a crack in her armor. When she walked into the room, everything shifted. Conversations stopped, people straightened. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Cale felt it too, that unspoken weight of her presence. She didn't look at him at first. She reviewed documents, asked sharp questions, and moved through the room with effortless authority. But when her gaze finally landed on him, it was like being pinned in place. Not cruel, not kind, just intensely observant, as if she could see every failure, every struggle he carried. The interview was brief. Too brief. She asked him why he wanted the job. He didn't give a rehearsed answer. He didn't talk about ambition or growth. He simply said the truth, that he needed it, that he had a daughter, that he wasn't asking for sympathy, just a chance. Something flickered in her expression. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but Cale saw it. He got the job. Days turned into weeks, and Cale worked harder than he ever had. He showed up early, stayed late, and never complained, even when the tasks were exhausting. He fixed broken systems, carried heavy loads, and quietly solved problems others ignored. But life didn't get easier. The bills didn't stop. The landlord grew impatient. And Sarah's school fees loomed like a storm he couldn't outrun. One afternoon, everything changed again. A corporate retreat had been planned outside the city, a mandatory overnight trip for key staff. Somehow, Cale's name ended up on the FAO list. It didn't make sense. He wasn't important enough for something like that, but questioning it felt risky, so he went. The resort was nothing like anything he had ever experienced. Wide open spaces, clean air, and silence that felt almost unreal after the constant noise of the city. There had been a mix-up with the rooms. Overbooking, miscommunication, something along those lines. By the time it was sorted out, there was only one room left, and only one bed. Kyle was ready to leave. He would have slept in the lobby or outside if he had to. But then Astra spoke. She said it was fine. that it was just for one night, that there was no need to make it complicated. He didn't argue, not because he was comfortable with it, but because he had learned that sometimes survival meant accepting situations you never imagined you'd face. The room was quiet, too quiet. They stayed on opposite sides, barely acknowledging each other. Kyle lay there, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. His mind was filled with everything: his daughter, his debts, his past. Midnight came and went, and then he heard it, a voice, not strong, not commanding like during the day, but fragile, broken. Astra was speaking in her sleep. At first, he thought he imagined it. But then the words became clearer. Apologies, regret, a name repeated over and over again, a name filled with pain. Kyle turned slightly, careful not to make noise. He didn't want to invade her privacy, but something about the sound in her voice made it impossible to ignore. It wasn't just sadness. It was guilt, deep, consuming guilt. She whispered about a mistake, about someone she couldn't save, about a choice that cost everything. The woman the world saw, the powerful CEO, the untouchable leader, wasn't here in that moment. This was someone else. Someone carrying a weight just as heavy as his own. Kyle didn't interrupt. He didn't move closer. He simply listened, not out of curiosity, but out of quiet understanding, because he knew what it felt like to carry something you couldn't fix. The next morning, Astra was different. Not outwardly, her posture was the same, her tone as controlled as ever. But Kyle noticed the subtle change, the way her eyes lingered a moment longer, the way her voice softened ever so slightly when she spoke to him. Neither of them mentioned the night, but something had shifted. In the weeks that followed, Astra began to notice him more. Not just his work, but the way he approached it. The care he put into everything, no matter how small. The quiet resilience that refused to break even under pressure. And slowly, she started to change too. Not dramatically, not in ways the board would notice, but in small human ways. She stayed a little longer in conversations. She listened more. She made decisions that prioritized people, not just profits. Cale didn't realize it, but that one night had done more than reveal a secret. It had connected two broken lives in a way neither of them expected. Then came the day everything nearly fell apart. Cale received the final notice. Eviction. Immediate. He tried to stay composed at work, but Astra saw through it. She always did. This time, she didn't wait. She called him into her office, and for the first time, she didn't speak as a CEO. She spoke as someone who understood loss, who understood what it meant to stand on the edge with nowhere left to go. She offered him help, not charity, not pity, but a real opportunity, a stable position, better pay and support he didn't think existed for someone like him. Kyle hesitated. Pride had kept him going this long. But then he thought of Sarah, and he said yes. Life didn't magically become perfect, but it became possible again. Months later, Kyle stood in a new apartment, watching his daughter laugh as sunlight poured through the windows. It wasn't luxury, but it was safe. It was theirs. And somewhere in the city, Astra sat in her office, no longer carrying her guilt alone. That night had changed her too. It had reminded her that even the strongest people need connection. That even the most powerful lives can feel empty without it. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, comment, and share. Your support keeps stories like this alive and reaching those who need them most. And before we end, tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment where everything changed because someone simply understood you? Because sometimes it only takes one night, one secret, and one act of kindness to change everything forever.